In our last episode, number 32, we discussed how sometimes the building code requires a fire-rated separation between two occupancies, but we also discussed how there are some exceptions. In other words, how not to provide a fire-rated separation even if Table 508.4 of the IBC requires them. Would you like to find out more? Today, we're going to discuss one of those exceptions. So if you want to know, don't go anywhere. You're about to find out. Hi there. My name is Josue Diaz. I am a licensed architect in the state of California, and this is Archi Corner. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the exception to not providing a fire-rated separation between occupancies. Mixing occupancies is often necessary. There are so many different examples of what could happen when one occupancy requires to be next to another occupancy. We probably can't discuss them all here, but we're going to give the following example. Oftentimes, in an office environment, there are conference rooms within that office, whether it's a suite or an office building. And oftentimes those conference rooms are large enough to be considered A3 occupancies. In other words, you end up having an A occupancy inside or next to a B occupancy. Using this as an example, IBC Table 508.4 states that there is a fire-rated separation required between these two occupancies. However, providing a separation between them can often be very expensive. We're talking about a fire-rated wall between them, but also fire-rating any penetrations. These could be conduits penetrating the wall. It could be HVAC equipment like ducts or otherwise, fire sprinklers, and other items. In addition, there's also doors that lead into those rooms or spaces, and those doors also have to be fire-rated. If you have windows, they also have to be fire-rated. And you can start seeing how this can get very expensive. Finding a way to get around this often saves a lot of money. And oftentimes, that leads to thousands of dollars in savings by not having to provide a fire-rated separation between occupancies. So how can you get around this? What are the exceptions? Today, we're going to talk about one of those exceptions. And you can find it in IBC 508.2, which is titled Accessory Occupancies. To find out more how these accessory occupancies work, let's continue with the example and find out how we can apply this exception. Let's assume that we are in a Type 3 sprinklered building, and we have an office suite, which is considered B occupancy, on the 3rd floor. Our suite is 8,000 square feet. This office space has a 900 square foot conference room, which can be considered large in an office environment. If we provide an occupant load, we find out it has more than 49 occupants. As such, this conference room is classified as an A3 occupancy. I don't want to get too much off subject here, but have in mind that a conference room only becomes an A3 occupancy if it has more than 49 occupants. Therefore, for the purposes of this example, let's assume that the conference room has 60 occupants. And that's because 900 divided by 15 equals 60 occupants. If this is a bit confusing to you, there is a video that has been created on how to calculate occupancy loads. A link to this video will appear on the screen now, and you can also find a link to it in the description below. If we look at Table IBC 508.4, we find out that there is a requirement for 1-hour separations between B and A occupancies. And if you look at the table and stop there, you would assume that you have to provide the separation, but there are exceptions. Section 508.2.4, titled Separation of Occupancies, states, no separation is required between accessory occupancies and the main occupancy. So our task here then is to find out if our conference room is accessory to the office. In other words, if your A3 is accessory to your B occupancy. If so, then you won't have to provide a separation, and that is what we want. So, what are the requirements for the A3 occupancy to be considered an accessory occupancy? First, let's talk about what occupancies cannot be considered accessory occupancies. Per IBC 508.4 exceptions 1 and 2, You must know that you cannot apply this exception to H2, H3, H4, and H5 occupancies. Also, groups such as I1, R1, and R3 must also have a separation. Having said that, you won't be able to take advantage of this exception if that is the case. In our example, we have an A3 and B occupancies, so we're still good. So let's move on to the second requirement. Section 508.2.3 states, aggregate accessory occupancies shall not occupy more than 10% of the floor area of the story in which they are located, and shall not exceed the tabular values for non-sprinklered buildings in Table 506.2 for each such accessory occupancy. So, in essence, two things must happen. Let's start with the first one. It cannot occupy more than 10% of the floor area of the story. In our example, our conference room is 900 square feet, and our suite is 8,000 square feet. But we are not interested in the size of our suite alone. We are interested in the size of the entire floor. The square footage of the entire floor is 20,000 square feet. This is important. Do not just look at the suite you are working on. You must look at the entire floor. So if we do the math, 900 square feet divided by 20,000 square feet equals 0.045, or in other words, 4.5%. So we are well under 10%. However, remember that you must look at the aggregate accessory occupancies. This may be a bit hard to do, but you must know what the other suites have in their space. Do they also have spaces that can be considered an A3 occupancy? If they do, you must also add them and confirm that you are still under 10%. However, that might be a bit tricky because you may not always have access to those spaces or the floor plans to those spaces. But if you do have access to all the spaces and floor plans of the entire floor, that might be a lifesaver. The second hurdle, check. So now let's move on to the third requirement. The other item within this same section states that the values must not exceed the values in Table 506.2 for such accessory occupancy. That is easy to do. In looking at that table, we see that an A3 occupancy in a non-sprinklered Type 3B building can have 9,500 square feet. So we do the test again. 900 is less than 9,500 square feet. So we are good. So the last hurdle, check. In conclusion, our occupancies are not H2, H3, H4, H5, I1, R1, or an R3. So we're good. Our A3 occupancy is less than 10% of the floor area. So again, we are good. And third, our A3 occupancy is less than what is allowed per Table 506.2. So what is the result? This is considered an accessory occupancy and therefore does not need to have a fire-rated separation. Woohoo! It's as easy as that. So what did you think of this exception? Have you used it in the past? Did you know about this already? If so, great. And if you didn't know, well, now you have something that you know and potentially something that you can use in the future. However, this exception doesn't always work because in order to apply for the exception, you have to have accessory occupancies. In other words, these added occupancies have to be less than 10% of your floor area, and that is not always the case. So then the question comes up, what if you have an occupancy that's more than 10% of the floor area? What do you do then? Well, there is another exception. Would you like to know what that other exception is? If so, I think I have great news for you. A video for that exception has already been made, and you can find that video in my new Patreon account. That's right, I now have a Patreon account. So if you would like to support me, you will find more details on my Patreon account in the description below. There's going to be a lot of benefits as part of this Patreon account. One of them being that you will always get to see my videos first, starting with video number 34. So if you want to head on over there, you can watch it now. In addition, if you decide to support me on Patreon, you will always be able to vote on all future videos. A poll will be provided before a video is made, and the winning poll will be the one that decides what the next video, theme, or subject is about. Because a lot of the information I provide in these videos have to do with some sketches and doodles that you see on the screen, a lot of people have asked if I have copies of those sketches. Well, now I can say that I have them for most of the videos. So if you would like to have a copy of the doodles and sketches that are part of these videos, you can also find them in my Patreon account. And this is just the beginning. In the future, more benefits will be provided, but we will see how this works out, and perhaps even with some of your suggestions, we can have something that is great. It is very exciting for me to announce this, and I hope that this will be exciting for you too. Hopefully it's something that you've been wanting and that you can go and support me and get something out of it. As always, I thank you for watching this video. I hope that what you found in this video is helpful to you. If you think that this information can help others in the industry, please feel free to forward this to them. That helps a lot. Don't forget to like this video if indeed you liked it. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe. But for now, this is Archie Corner signing out.